of all, can everybody hear me? I have a lapel mic. I'm not sure if it's working. No, it's not working. Okay, so I'm going to go back to this mic. Is this working? Okay, so it's great to be here. As I'm sure many of you are aware, there's a direct line that can be drawn from Ayn Rand to Cato. And so there's a certain weightiness and a certain importance to being invited to speak here. And I can't imagine a better or a more informed audience. And because this is an unusual crowd, I'm going to do a somewhat unusual talk. Typically, in my book talks, I will make sure to give a lot of background about Ayn Rand and the details of her life. I'll still do that, but I want to spend most of my time laying out 3 arguments about the influence and impact of Ayn Rand on the American right. So 3 of the primary arguments I want to lay out are in terms of how Rand influenced the right. First of all, that we should consider her the ultimate gateway drug to life on the right. As David said, she had this incredible impact on her readers, drew them in. When they moved on from her, often the residue, the impact, the basic framework of her ideas stayed with them. Secondly, I want to argue that she was a major reason for the emergence of an independent libertarian movement, of which Cato is perhaps the fullest flowering. And I want to argue that her popularity among libertarians, particularly her emphasis on capitalism, ensured that this independent libertarian movement, when it emerged, remained moored to the right side of the spectrum instead of becoming a left-leaning ideology as it had the potential to do. Now this brings me to the title of my book, Goddess of the Market, Ayn Rand and the American Right. And I chose this title very deliberately. Throughout the book, I juxtapose Rand to conservatives, but I don't call her a conservative, and I don't identify her as a conservative because there are a multiplicity of reasons why she doesn't fit in that category. The most obvious one would be her atheism, but there's a whole host of other reasons, which I'm sure you're all thinking of now, which make her really incompatible with this synthetic modern American conservatism we know today. So I place her instead on this broader category of the American right. And when I use the term American right, I'm not being pejorative. This isn't a code word for fascism. I'm simply choosing the term, the right, to draw our attention to this broader ideological field that includes conservatives but is not limited to them, that includes other groups, libertarians, anarcho-capitalists, regular capitalists, classical liberals, all those who are interested in limited government and the promotion of capitalism as a social and economic system. So some readers of my book have objected to the fact that I put her on the right, saying she really transcends all political categories. Now, I definitely get the point of this line of argument. My feeling was, this is my first book. I'm going to work with the political categories we all know and understand and perhaps hate. Maybe in my second book, I'll get around to attacking these categories themselves. But I may not need to because I think they are shifting already. And one reason I think this is because of the extraordinary surge of interest in Rand that we've seen in the last year. I think of Rand as a sort of canary in the ideological coal mine. She's a sign that things are changing. An interest in her is a sign that tectonic plates are shifting under the surface. People are going back to the fundamentals and asking what really matters, what really counts, what do they really believe. Now, this happened first and most notably in the 1950s, when the conservative verdict on Rand came out, and it was mostly negative. And this is why I was first drawn to studying Rand, because I was really interested in conservatism in the 1950s, in this critical decade as it developed, as this fusionist ideology which linked Christian morality to free market capitalism was developed. And Rand played this critical role as this sort of joker in the deck, right? The one that might upset the cart. And so she had to be pushed to the side. But the point is that in periods of critical ideological formation, Rand emerges as a factor, as a person, as an influence that has to be dealt with, that has to be considered. And so I think that something along those lines is happening right now. So I want to encourage you tonight to think with me about what does it mean that we're all talking about Rand so much right now. And given this crowd, it might not just be an academic exercise. We might not be thinking, we might be deciding. So let me just back up and start with the basics. The big question, who is Ayn Rand? She was born Elisa Rosenbaum in Petrograd, Russia in 1905. And when she was 12 years old, her family lived through the Russian Revolution. I want to read you now the opening scene in my book where I describe this experience. It was a wintry day in 1918 when the Red Guard pounded on the door of Zinovy Rosenbaum's chemistry shop. The guards bore a seal of the state of Russia, which they nailed upon the door, signaling it had been seized in the name of the people. Zinovy could at least be thankful the mad whirl of revolution had taken only his property, not his life. But his eldest daughter, Elisa, 12 at the time, burned with indignation. The shop was her father's. He had worked for it, studied long hours at university, dispensed valued medicine and advice to his customers. Now in an instant it was gone, taken to benefit nameless, faceless peasants, strangers who could offer her father nothing in return. The soldiers had come in boots, carrying guns, making clear that resistance would mean death. Yet they had spoken the language of fairness and equality, their goal to build a better society for all. Watching, listening, absorbing, Elisa knew one thing for certain. Those who invoked such lofty ideals were not to be trusted. Talk about helping others was only a thin cover for force and power. It was a lesson she would never forget. So I'll fast forward from this point on because it's all in the book. Her decision to leave Russia to come to America, her early years of struggle in Hollywood, the beginning of her success as a screenwriter, her early triumph with The Fountainhead, her career-making book, Atlas Shrugged, in 1957. And what I do in the book is I return to these very well-known novels, and I show how deeply Rand understood them to be political texts. Drawing on some unpublished material that's held in her archive, I show the extent of Rand's activism in the 1940 presidential campaign of Wendell Willkie, how she began to conceive herself to be a John Steinbeck of her side, how she understood The Fountainhead to be not just a thrilling story about individualism and collectivism, but how she hoped it could have an impact on the New Deal order itself, how it could rouse to the barricades a class of political activists and capitalists eager to roll back what she saw as the illegitimate and immoral reforms of Franklin Roosevelt. So this is where Rand got her start and made her fame. And I turn now to the question of how did she affect the American right? And in the book, I spend a good deal of time detailing her connection to other pivotal figures like Rothbard, Mises, Buckley. She knew everyone. And she pretty much got in a fight with everyone. So here I want to focus not so much on these luminaries, but more on the rank and file, of the libertarian movement or the American right. What kind of impact did she have on those people whose names we don't remember today?